My name's Sven, and I'm a performance poet, creative, filmmaker, painter, muppet, work in progress, all-round silly guy. Stand on stage and do silly things, but meaningful things. My favourite poem at the moment for my set is my poem Little Green Box. Little Green Box is a poem that had quite a silly birthplace. I used to live in Bristol, in Bedminster, and on the way to work I would walk past a funeral parlour, and outside there was a defibrillator bolted to its outside wall. And the kick-off point for the poem is exactly that, walking past and seeing that and kind of questioning why on earth there'd be a defibrillator in a place where we send dead people. But it's a much deeper and more meaningful poem than that. It talks about my relationship with my dad, my relationship with my grandmother, my dad's relationship with my grandmother. It deals with the grief of her passing away, and then pivots again a little bit to talk about mental health and suicide ideation, and how I have made a bunch of silly mistakes in my life that should mean I probably shouldn't be here. And coming out the other side of that and then being kind of happy that I am here. It's a comical poem that deals with really, really heavy subject matter in a way that I hope people, when they hear it, can digest the heaviness of that subject matter in an easier way and laugh at how silly we make death, how serious we make it, and how silly that is. When I moved to Bristol, that's going back 8 years now, I was dating someone who has a medical condition called lupus. And I wrote a poem about our relationship called Broken. And it's about lupus, obviously, and how my partner at the time dealt with that condition, how I dealt with it, and how I dealt with my own mental health issues, and the interplay of those two disabilities, physical disability and mental disability, and how love can conquer those situations and difficulties and hardships. It's a really, really heartfelt and honest poem. I retired it from my set for a long time after her and I broke up, as it didn't feel right to perform it, and it felt slightly disingenuous when that love wasn't there anymore. But I've started re-including it in my sets and producing a video for it even, because I now believe that although the time has passed that poem talks about, it is a time that I felt in earnest. It is a snapshot of my life. Like all poetry serves a purpose to be. Not everything lasts forever. We can still read poetry about the Second World War because it captures an important, pivotal moment in our lives, despite no longer being objectively, situationally true. And I'm really, really glad that I managed to find the truth and emotion in the poem. And the video for it's going to be fucking fantastic. So the album, The Torch, came about because I was really, really fed up in a multitude of ways. It's really, really difficult as a performance artist to have people experience your work when you're not there. And I have a book out, and that's fantastic, but a book isn't a performance. I'm not a writer, I'm a performer. I mean, I have to write to perform, but let's not get bogged down in the weeds. My primary skill set is as a performer, and people are reading those words. Unless they've seen me perform, they're not going to be able to read it in my voice. So I initially recorded an album called Wave, which was just me talking, speaking, performing my poems into a microphone, and then uploading them as acapellas, essentially. But I really wanted to kind of see what I could do with music as well. I've got a bunch of friends who are producers and musical and talented and wonderful. So I dumped a bunch of those poems into a Google Drive and then told those friends to kind of have at it. And just kind of took the material that I got back and then uploaded it onto Spotify and through my distribution again, and saw what happened. And really, really love what's happened with that project. So managed to work very wonderfully with a bunch of talented and diverse people. You've got Bad Belly, you've got Chris Beale, you've got Patrick Fenton, you've got Jake Nathan, who's an amazing poet in his own right as well, who have all taken the time to produce music and beats for those poems and then mix them and then send them back, and it's doing quite well on Spotify, and it's just a really, really fun kind of different new way to have people experience my work. A really, really interesting thing that's happened at the start of that is, because I didn't tell people which ones to pick, I just kind of gave them a folder and said, pick what you want, go! Some of them picked the same poem, so Mitt, Bandbelly and Rickham all picked Drowning in Ether, Reaching for Matches Like Driftwood. So there are now 3 mixes of that poem that all sound immensely different, and that's fascinating for me. It's led to what will be the next project, Isomer 1 and 2, where I'm going to be slightly more dictatorial and give a producer 2 poems to remix, but then give a different producer one of those poems to remix as well. So you end up with 2 albums that all have the same poems on them, but are remixed by different people on each album. So you can see the interplay of that creativity once it's left my hands, and that's fascinating. What happens to creativity when I'm no longer involved in that process? How different people can interpret the same art differently. And as a performance poet, that's something we have to deal with every day. Once the poem leaves your mouth or it's in a book, you have no control over what someone else hears or experiences when they read or hear your work. And that is fascinating. That's really, really intriguing territory. Yeah, so I can kind of track the crucial, pivotal moments in my development as a poet and how my poetry's changed and developed over that time. I think the first one is those initial days of wise words and being surrounded by a type of person that I'd never really hung around with before, being poets. I'd always written poetry as a kid, but it was more like the really sad stuff you put on DeviantArt and don't really admit is yours. Which is, I'm being glib about, but it's a crucial starting point for a lot of people. It's where a lot of people come from and develop from. But meeting performance poets for the first time, realising that you can actually be on stage and talk about this stuff was like a bomb going off. It was really, really important. And then that was a sort of, after that, going into those schools and youth projects and groups and stuff, that was kind of a slow development. And then I moved to Bristol, and Bristol really helped me develop really, really quickly. Getting involved in slam culture especially, because with slam, for all of its failings and things wrong with slam and the slam scene, it does teach you a certain kind of poetry at a very fast rate. The feedback you get from an audience and the judges is fairly immediate. So you learn very quickly what's working, what isn't working, and how to grow and change. And some would argue homogenise with what is expected in slam culture, but you do learn, as I said, a type of poetry really, really quickly. And you learn performance values and artistry and stagecraft very quickly as well. And then hearing a poem by a guy called Polar Bear, Stephen Camden, again, was a light bulb moment. He has this poem, Jessica, which on the face of it is just about being a girl as a kid and growing up with her and playing football in the park with your friends and a relationship with your parents and then having your own child. But there's so much jam-packed into that poem that it's very, very deep. And up until that point in my life, I have been writing about quite simple concepts and obfuscating them and making them deliberately complex, because that's what I thought art was. And then hearing it done the other way around, taking very, very complex subject matters and important ones and simplifying them through art is beautiful, and I hadn't seen it or witnessed it really before. So that was another moment. And then I kind of quit poetry and threw my toys at the pram, threw the towel in, when my drinking became too much and my relationships with the people around me, including my family and friends and other poets in Bristol, kind of deteriorated because of my actions and what I was doing. So quitting poetry was bad, but also really, really integral for my growth. It was through quitting poetry and discovering other art forms that I realised one of the things that was upsetting me about poetry was the impermanence of it. The nature of being on stage is that once you're not on stage, you no longer exist. To all intents and purposes, through the audience society, you are dead, you no longer exist. So that's what inspired the video work that I do and the musical work that I'm doing as well. How to continue the lifespan of a poet, a performance poet, when they're no longer on stage and no longer exist. Really arty-farty way of saying. So that was really, really important. Then coming back to poetry through sobriety was again another massively important step. I came back to poetry performance because I took a trip to Germany and discovered a new, renewed love for performance work, stagecraft and poetry. And I've developed a lot since I got sober. So when I was drinking and spending all my money on silly, frivolous things, I wouldn't have had the wherewithal and the financial ability to take a trip to Germany. I wouldn't have been able to apply for a DYCP grant and explore video poetry. I wouldn't have been able to do any of the work that I've done. I wouldn't be so self-aware, so cognizant, so emotionally aware of other people. My work since I've got sober has grown and developed because it's no longer just selfish. It's no longer just about me. I find I'm writing more and more and more about the implications, sure, of my actions, but of societal actions and those changes that affect all of us. And this next phase of my writing career, I've done a master's as well, which again I wouldn't have been able to do before. I'm really looking forward to. It's going to be it's a big question mark. It's a massive mystery. I have no idea what the next 5 years are going to hold, but it is exciting. I'm going to be working with new people, different people, writing about new material, new stuff, doing it in different ways. I don't know how sobriety is going to affect my work because I'm still doing it. Okay. I don't know how sobriety is going to affect my work. You'll have to have a little arrow go, ding, alcohol free. The most exciting thing I've done recently has been a tour of Germany. Germany in inverted commas is very much in the northwest and central parts of Germany. I've still yet to go to Bavaria and Munich and parts of the east. But that was incredible, magical. If I'm not to sound too like lovey-dovey, it really was a wonderful experience. So I was going to go for 2 weeks, and the promoters and producers in Germany helped me organise an entire tour of seven dates. So I performed in Erfurt, Dortmund, Düsseldorf, Münster, Lüneburg, Kiel and Flensburg. Germany as a country, like I've got lots of ties to Germany that are really, really important to me. I was born in Münster because I'm an army brat. My dad was in the armed forces. Both my parents were English, but I was born in Germany. Obviously, I'm called Sven, which isn't the most Anglican name you can have. German poetry is so incredibly different from what we have over here. So first of all, in a UK slam, you might be aware that we have 3 minutes in which to perform a poem. In Germany, German slams, I don't know why I said it like that. In Germany, they have a very, very different format. They will have 5, 6, maybe even 7 minutes to perform, and it's a text. It doesn't have to be a poem. It can be prose or fiction of any kind. I think they have some stricter slams here and there, but that's a general consensus over there. It's really tempting to make a joke about them needing 5 minutes because the words are so long in German. I've made it now. I wasn't gonna, but I did. So it just takes a very, very different format. But it's also, like, the expectations are very, very different as well. They regularly have audiences that number in the hundreds, not the tens. There is an event in Hamburg where they fill out the Elbphilharmonie, which is kind of like Hamburg's answer to the Sydney Opera House. It's a big, beautiful building that lots of professional, good people perform. 2,100 seats. And they fill it 3 times in one day for a poetry event. That is 6,300 seats. It's a crazy scale for in the UK is often derided as not even a fine art. Like, we, as performance poets, often get laughed at by proper poets, page poets and stuff. So for it to be so big over there, and to have so many conversations about what people do in Germany with poetry. So many of their performance poets go on to be comedians and run television shows and have careers. And even the ones that aren't that successful can make careers out of slam poetry, getting paid for appearing at slams, not just maybe winning and getting a beer or something. And that's, again, I don't want to deride what's happening in the UK slam culture, because things are changing, they're growing, they're getting better. There are a lot of people working really hard to make a lot of progress in the UK slam culture. But Germany is just light years ahead of where we are. They can put on an event and almost be guaranteed that an audience will show up, the public and the general populace are interested in it. And that means that they can afford to do things like pay everyone. And that's wonderful. And the German councils will invest in arts heavier than ours do. They have a valid, large interest in the arts and poetry that we don't see here, and that's for the UK slam culture to change something like that. It's a top-down change. We need a change of government, obviously, more interest from the Vox Populi in things like the arts, and for artists to pay more attention to what the audience want to hear as well, I think. For it to seem less like an ivory tower and more like a democratised process. I love Germany, and I love England, but I would love for the success that Germany enjoys to be here as well. I think slams need to do something different. Slam was delivered to the UK poetry scene as this answer, as this fixed thing that we can trick audiences into being involved in the competition and voting and being part of the process. And that's all fine and well, but we've been doing it for 20, 30 years now, and the format hasn't changed, it hasn't grown, it hasn't evolved. What I want to see from promoters and producers, people running slam to live events, is for them to grow in the same way that you want poets to grow, and events need to do the same thing. So having people at slams who will sketch people or draw people or create art live at the event is a great way of changing it and growing it. Having multiple rounds where one's a minute long and off of a prompt, or 5 minutes long and for different prompts, challenging people to write in different ways and try new things, is something that promoters and producers who run events can do from the ground up. Change and the fun can be baked in from the very beginning. It doesn't just have to be up to the poets. Pete Bearder. Pete's got a book called Spoken Word Renaissance, Poetry Renaissance, and it's all about how spoken word came to be its current format in the UK. I'm only like a sixth of the way through, I guess, but it's a really, really fascinating book. Pete knows more about slam culture than most of the people in the slam scene, poetry scene. Like, I think Lucy English also wrote a book that I've got to read next about the same topic. So Pete's got really, really good insight into hip-hop culture, into the history of slam, how it came over to the UK from the States, how it's changed and morphed over here. Deals with concepts like, when things are slammy and the negatives and positives of slam culture. It's a really fascinating book, and I would recommend it to anyone engaging in slam culture whatsoever, because as performers, we don't necessarily think about the history and implications of what we're doing, and why and how, and he really beautifully deconstructs that. And I think a lot of people could learn from what he's got to say. So I have a whole bunch of projects on my slate at the moment. I'm working on a video for a poem of mine called Broken, which we're going to premiere at Cacofonix. It's going to be really, really exciting. There's a whole ream of videos that I'm working on at the moment and want to get out there. I find that video work is really, really integral to fighting that impermanent nature of performance art. Don't ever take yourself seriously. One of the things that I see a lot in slam culture especially is people taking it too seriously. Getting wound up about losses, putting too much value in the wins, and getting too involved in that competitive element. What happens in slam, or what can happen in slam arguably, is an homogenization of styles and forms. And if you don't take yourself seriously, the losers aren't going to bother you. You'll treat the wins as humbly as you should. And you will continue to play with language. And that's all poetry is. It is language Lego. And you need to keep that in mind when you're writing or performing, that it's supposed to be fun. And you're supposed to be playing. And if you can entertain people and find a tribe and people like you that enjoy the same things that you do, that's where the beauty is.
Yeah. This is right. That's it, right?
Get wrecked, son! That's on camera. That was recorded.
Sit down, discussion.
Serious business.